Have you walked into a Catholic bookstore and looked around for Bibles and seen a whole plethora of different choices ahead of you? Like you've seen blue Bibles and yellow Bibles and red Bibles and Bibles with all kinds of translation names and all sizes, and wondered which one would be good for you. Today, within these sacred walls, we will be discussing just that: what makes a good Bible based on our objectives, and how to identify the ones which really are good for us. So to go through these options and discuss how we identify the right Bible for us, I have Gerson with me, who will be taking us through how do we go about selecting the right Bible for us. Gerson.
Hi, Derek. Yes, this is a very important topic, and I have been passionate about this topic for many years. I remember growing up, I didn't know the differences, and as I learned more about them, I almost started geeking out about it. I like, owning different translations. I like appreciating the differences in the translations. I like using various translations for different purposes, and I would love to share this with everyone.
Yeah. So what are the first step? Like the first step, I walk into a bookstore and what do I look for? Like
Right.
what like the first identifier? Like what is the first distinction I make?
Right. Yeah. So the first thing to look for is not what the Bible looks like, or if there are nice designs inside, or if it has like a foreword by someone you know. The first thing to know about is that there are differences between Catholic and Protestant Bibles. Now, if you go into a Catholic bookstore, this shouldn't be much of a problem because chances are they'll have Catholic books, although I have seen Catholic bookstores that have Protestant books as well. So you got to be careful there as well. But the first thing is noting that there are differences in the Bible in terms of the books. So if you actually go into the table of contents of a Protestant Bible and a Catholic Bible, the Catholic Bible has a few books that are not in the Protestant Bible. So we're talking about Tobit, Baruch, Judith, Wisdom, Sirach, 1 and 2 Maccabees, and there are also some differences in the books of Daniel and Esther. Now, these differences are what Protestants called Apocrypha. You might have heard that term. Catholics call them deuterocanonicals. Now, we're not going to talk into detail about the history of this, but we could in a future episode if there is interest. So next time you're in a Catholic bookstore, first thing you need to do is check the table of contents and look for these books. If you find these books in the table of contents, most likely that's a Catholic Bible. And if you don't, then most likely it's a Protestant Bible. I say most likely because there are some Protestant Bibles that do include these Apocrypha, as they call it, and that's more as in supplemental reading. They don't consider it the divine word of God, but they still include it anyway. And so that's why I say most likely Catholic Bibles will have it and Protestant Bibles will not.
Yeah, a quick top of the head way of checking it out is the Protestant Bibles have 66 books and the Catholic ones have 73. But then
Right. That's a good point. You can also count it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the count and the names of the books are not all. There is something else that we need to look at.
Right.
It's something like a seal of approval.
Yeah, that's right. So Catholic Bibles have a stamp of approval by the church, and the stamp of approval is on the first few pages of the Bible. So you've got to look at that and look for these two Latin phrases. The first Latin phrase is called nihil obstat. And what that means is nothing stands in the way. And so this is the first step in the process of a publishing company or an organization that's putting out a Catholic Bible. This is kind of like a quality check. And all it means is that there are no doctrinal errors, contradictions with the Catholic faith and Catholic teaching. The other word to look for, which is right there with nihil obstat, is a word called imprimatur, which is again Latin for let it be printed. And this is just permission that this can be printed and it does not contradict with Catholic teaching. So when you're looking for a Catholic Bible, besides the number of books, also look for these two Latin phrases that should exist in the first few pages of the book. It also includes when it was, when this process happened, and the bishop or the diocese of that approved it.
Okay, so there could be individual diocese, a bishop from a diocese who gives the nihil obstat. So that's good. That's good enough. You don't need to go through a central authority as such. I mean, overall central authority in the church, it's local diocese
exactly.
Bishop.
So I'll give you an example. The ESV Catholic edition recently got its imprimatur. I think it was in 2018. And if you look at the first few pages, it actually has the location or the place, the diocese, and it was actually in India. So the imprimatur stamp of approval was by one of the dioceses in India. So interesting.
That's pretty interesting. We okay. Now I've verified. Okay, I've got a legit Catholic Bible, but I still don't have just a single choice, right? Like I have a whole bunch of
Yeah,
different translations, as we call them, and
that's right.
when I open them up, I see some of the English is nice and friendly, and some has some heavy, old dated words or very,
That's right.
different kind of language. So what are the different types, and how do we go about
Right.
identifying which is good for us?
Right. So there are two approaches when translating. Bible translators, they have to be theologians and well versed with theology and the faith. And they have to make choices when translating, because we're talking about translating from the original languages, which is ancient Hebrew and ancient Greek. And many of these languages don't have an easy way to translate into English. They don't have the same root linguistic wise. Right. So one of the approaches is what is called a word for word approach. And the approach here is that the Bible translators are trying to be as faithful to the original text as possible, the original Greek or Hebrew. The other approach is to go with a more thought for thought or idea by idea approach. And this is more targeted at today's language, today's world. So what tends to happen is that the first group, the word for word, which is called formal equivalents, these translations tend to be a little heavy and dense, while the other approach, dynamic equivalents, so the dynamic equivalents Bibles tend to be easier to read and more approachable, and we can identify with in today's world. And we'll go over some of the examples of each of these. And the other thing to note is that this is not a Catholic-only difference. This applies to even Protestant Bibles. Even Protestant Bibles have formal equivalence Bibles and dynamic equivalence Bibles. So this is another very important thing to keep in mind. Depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to study the Bible, study the times, study the cultural worldview at the time, then you definitely want to pick up a formal equivalence Bible or use a formal equivalence Bible. On the other hand, if it's just light devotional reading or you're just, going through the Bible, the dynamic equivalence is also pretty good. But you kind of want a combination of both, even multiple formal equivalence Bibles and dynamic equivalence Bibles. You need a whole library in your home in order to make the most of it.
That's for geeks like you, man. But I would say like the average person would probably have at least two types of Bible. One would be a formal study Bible for
Sure.
in-depth study, and the other would be, like you said, for daily reading, devotionals, where it be lighter reading,
Correct.
or something you could do with
At
the
least
family
two, yeah.
and so on and so forth. Yeah. So can you just
for sure.
highlight, like, okay, what are the differences, or where you would actually see, where it would make a difference in terms of the reading and understanding?
Right. And so these are these exact. So I'm going to show you some examples of differences between different translations or verses in the translations, and I'm going to pick key verses of the Bible where this is actually prominent. So the first example is in Luke 1 verse 28. And this difference highlights the difference between Catholic Bibles and Protestant Bibles. So the verse reads, and I'm reading from the RSV Catholic edition, and he came to her and said, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you." We're looking at the term "full of grace" here, and this phrase "full of grace." The word "grace" in itself comes from the Latin Vulgate, and this was the translation that Saint Jerome came up with, which then became the Douay Rheims, which is another Bible translation. And if you notice, all of the other Bibles that do not come from this line do not have this phrase "full of grace." They have instead, "O highly favored one." Right? So even the ESV Catholic edition, which is from the ESV edition, which is a Protestant edition, has "O highly favored one." Right? So this is, and he came to her and said, "Greetings, O highly favored one. The Lord is with you." The Douay Rheims has "full of grace." King James has "highly favored." NIV also has "highly favored." And then there's also the Good News translation, which not my favorite Bible, but it's really popular in India, and a lot of the examples will have the Good News translations as well. And so if you see the Good News version says, "Peace be with you. the Lord is with you and has greatly blessed you. You can see how different it is from all of the other translations. So if you want to do any serious Bible study, definitely not the Good News translation. And then if you look at the actual Greek of this phrase of full of grace and highly favored one, the Greek word here is, and I'm going to butcher the name, but I'm going to try anyway. Kikaritomene is the Greek expression here. So the Ignatian Study Bible has a nice write-up about this phrase. And it talks about, first of all, that it comes from St. Jerome, but also how using the phrase full of grace implies that Mary has already been graced at that point. While highly favored one is not wrong, but it's just not adequate enough. So that's an example of Catholic Protestant difference. But let me give you another example. So this one highlights more of the difference between formal and dynamic. And so let's go to Genesis 22. And this passage is about Abraham being tested by God with his son Isaac. When they go up to the mountain of Moriah, Isaac notices that there is the wood and there's the fire, but there's no lamb for the sacrifice. And Abraham says God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering. And I heard this at a Bible study, and I haven't seen this in many commentaries, at least with the early church fathers. So take it for what it's worth. There are some translations, so like the RSV, for example, and the King James, which say God will provide himself the lamb. God will provide himself the lamb. And this highlights the fact that in the original text, which was Hebrew, they don't have punctuation. And so this could actually mean two things, that God was the provider of the sacrifice, right? So he was the sacrifice himself, right? As we know, Isaac was a type of Christ. There are lots of parallels with him carrying the wood up the hill in order to be sacrificed. While other translations, including the ESV, so the ESV says God will provide for himself. So when we look at that, it kind of implies more that the specific case of God is going to provide the lamb that was caught in a bush that Abraham and Isaac eventually offered to God. Right? So there are again not exactly a wrong translation, but it kind of misses that nuance of this double meaning, where it could mean that God himself is the sacrifice, and then God will provide the sacrifice, which is the lamb, and it could mean both those things, right? So that's a very subtle nuance that is definitely lost with the dynamic translations. All of the dynamic translations have God himself will provide. Yeah, so all of the dynamic translations are very clear and explicit about God providing the sacrifice, which is the lamb. But the third example I'd like to share is John 1:1. And this highlights a Bible translation called the New World Translation. And that's the Bible used by Jehovah Witnesses. This is an example of a really poor translation. So if you look at some of the examples, Catholics and Protestant Bibles all have, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And they all have almost exactly the same unanimously. I'm talking ESV, RSV, Douay Rheims, King James, even the Good News translation has the Word was God. But the New World Translation has it as the Word was a God, and God being lowercase there. And this is, of course, to support their doctrine of, the fact that Jehovah Witnesses don't accept the Trinity, right? And this is one of the Bible verses they use. The lesson here is not to use the New World Translation, because it's a pretty bad translation. And this is a common understanding even by Protestant scholars.
Yeah, and Jehovah's Witnesses are not even considered by Catholics and Protestants alike, not even considered as Christians, because they are not Trinitarian, and there are a whole bunch of things that that take you away. So even for the purpose of study, we would say maybe if you're well versed with Catholic scripture and you want to look at some of the content provided by Protestants, it would be okay at some point. But I think Jehovah's Witness would be a no-no, because unless you're a very deep scholar and you're doing some comparisons, it's best to avoid.
Yeah. And they often call them pseudo-Christians. Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses are often called pseudo-Christians because they are so far away from mainstream Christianity, which include Catholics and Protestants. And there's one more example I'd like to throw in there, which is the gender inclusive issue debate. And in today's world, actually, gender inclusion is on a whole different level. I'm talking about the mid-19th century, where there's a little bit of that, and the intention was good. So we're not talking about woke or anything like that. So let's look at Luke 20 verse 34. And the Bible translation I want to highlight here is the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic edition. There's also a Protestant edition, and this was in the mid 19th century. The reason for that was to use newer words or modern words to revise the RSV, which was an older translation. But one of the other things they did along with that was to make it more gender inclusive. To look at Luke 20 verse 34, and I won't read the whole verse, but part of it says, being born in the likeness of men. Right, so the ESV says that, RSV also says that, Douay-Rheims has it, likeness of men. Most of the formal translations, Catholic and Protestant, have it as likeness of men. The NRSV calls it human likeness, being born in human likeness. The New Jerusalem Bible, which is a respected Catholic Bible, has it as like a human being. The Good News Translation also has it as appeared in human likeness. Now, why is this an issue? This is an issue because the goal of a formal Bible translation is to try and be as faithful to the original text as possible, even if we don't agree with their culture and customs. So Old Testament period was a very patriarchal society, and so that's why they used terms like sons of God or likeness of men and so on. And the problem with the NRSV translating it as a human likeness is that nuance of the patriarchal nature of the Old Testament times is lost when reading it. And because it's supposed to be a formal equivalence Bible, people are using it in order to do Bible study, and they don't get that, right? The thing here is that if I pick a formal equivalence Bible, let me make the decisions on, whether I agree with it or how it affects today's world and all of that. But I need to know the nuance that it was a patriarchal society, and there are lots of conclusions I can derive from that. And so that is one of the bigger problems. This is one example. There are other examples as well of using the NRSV for Bible study.
Wow. So at the end of the day, the big question is, okay, what exactly
what Bible translation should I get?
Should I go? Yeah, because I do understand the nuances and where we need to be careful and where we need to be aware. It's not deceptive. It's just the way it's been translated. So we need to be careful of. So what would you suggest, and what, if you have to give a quick cheat sheet for me, what would it be?
So maybe a good idea is to talk about the most popular Bible translations, and then, of course, divided by formal and dynamic, because we are talking about two very different approaches to the Bible, and there's a good case to have both, right? And then there are also Catholic and Protestant Bibles. It's worth mentioning Protestant Bibles as well, not so much with the intent of buying it, but just being aware. If you have one lying around, it's good to know about Bible translations. Or if you're visiting a family member or a friend and you see a Protestant Bible in their house and they don't know about it, it's good to know something, so you can have a conversation with them about, right? And of course, the other option is, if you are deep into Bible study, you might want to get these Protestant Bibles to make comparisons and draw conclusions. But that's something to keep in mind. Only if you're, well catechized, otherwise it's not a good idea to go Bible study with Protestant Bibles if you're trying to be faithful Catholic. So I've got a list of the 4 most popular Catholic Bible translations. So there's the RSV, which is scholarly standard, and it's been that way for a long, long time. The ESV Catholic edition is a more recent Bible translation that I've seen some Catholic scholars transition into, but it's also a good Bible translation to have. There's the NRSV, which again I mentioned, it has the gender inclusive language. It is very popular in India, and so that is one of the translations I would not recommend. I'm still mentioning it though, just because it's so popular. And then the Douay-Rheims is a classic Catholic Bible translation. It's a translation of the Latin Vulgate by Saint Jerome, and it's about the same time as the King James Bible. So it has really old English. I have a copy. I don't use that a lot just because the language is so old, and it's hard for me to understand some basic terms and cultural references. So I typically don't use that. But if you are a fan of, the English of the Middle Ages, then this is definitely a Bible translation for you. The other, then we come to dynamic Catholic Bible translations. The top on my list for that is the New Jerusalem Bible. So that is, it's good for devotional reading. It is dynamic translation, so not for heavy Bible study. There's also the New American Bible, which is the official liturgical Bible in the US. And it's also very popular in India. I've seen many people with that New American Bible. Again, not the most popular for Bible study, okay for devotional reading. Then you have the Good News Translation, another dynamic translation, very, very, very popular in India. I wouldn't recommend this. It is very highly watered down. You miss a lot of the nuances for this. Probably okay for kids and youth and young readers, but for any serious Bible study, even for serious devotional reading, I wouldn't recommend the Good News. And then there's the Community Bible, which again is good for young readers, not ideal for devotional reading or Bible study. And then some non-Catholic Bibles worth mentioning. So there's the ESV, the original ESV, that's the Protestant edition. There's the King James Version, and these are kind of the two most popular translations used by Protestants for Bible study. There's the NESB and the ASV. These are also two popular formal translations, non-Catholic Bible translations. And then for dynamic, there's the NIV, which is the New International Version, very popular. There's the New Living Translation. I believe there's a Catholic version of the NLT Bible as well. I haven't seen it. I've seen it in a bookstore. I haven't bought it, and I don't, have you seen that?
No, I've not seen that one
Not
either.
familiar with that. Yeah. There's also the Message, which is a very popular Bible, and this one is very paraphrased. Certainly would not recommend it. It is a Protestant Bible, very, very paraphrased. So it's not just thought for thought, but paragraph for paragraph almost. Then of course there's the New World Translation, which is the Jehovah Witness Bible that I mentioned. That is not suitable for Catholics or Protestants for any serious Bible study.
So
yeah, so these are the most popular Bible translations.
that's interesting and good to know. I probably should stick a PDF in the notes of this video so that people can get a quick reference to the nuances of this. So besides, to talk about translation, are there any aids to doing a good Bible study or for daily devotions and so on? Yeah.
So of course one of the controversial topics is should we use a hard copy or should we use a Bible app? And there's no right answer for that. It depends on the situation. It's good to have both. So it's worth mentioning a couple of Bible apps that are popular, Catholic Bible apps. One of them is Verbum. It's my favorite app. The free version has the some of the popular Catholic Bibles, also has the catechism. And in terms of the actual application, it is amazing. So if you want to do any serious Bible study, Verbum is definitely the app to go. There's also Laudate, which I've seen is quite popular in India.
Yeah, it has a lot of
content.
Use it a lot. It's pretty good. I love it.
Yeah. It has the mass readings also, right? Mass readings and a lot of stuff. There's also Hallow, which came up a few years ago. Interesting Bible. It is a Bible app as well. There's the entire text of the Bible there and lots of audio programs in that, meditations and things like that. I don't know if there is a free version of it and how much is included. I think there is a free version and there are some things included in that, including the Bible itself. And there are some other, there's Ascension has an app that has
that's pretty good.
The Bible in that. Yeah. So lots of options there.
Catena is a good one for
Catena is a good one.
Good one with the early church father commentary in that it's pretty good.
That's right. Yeah. Bible study, good for Bible study. And then the other thing to think about is audio Bibles. And now with audio Bibles, there are two aspects. There is also the translation, but I think more important than the translation is the narration, the quality of the production and the narration, right? And the reason I say that is because typically you wouldn't do heavy Bible study with an audio Bible, right? It's not ideal. Typically you would listen to a Bible when you're driving or walking or, doing chores at home. And so you wouldn't listen to something heavy, right? So at that point, we're pretty much looking at, mainly dynamic translations. But even if it's a formal equivalence translation, the quality of the recording, matters a lot, right? So I want to point out a couple of options here. There's the Truth and Life Dramatized Audio Bible, which is the most popular and I think the only real Catholic option out there. So this includes like performances by 70 actors, really famous actors, and really good sound effects, voices, really, really good option. I don't think it's free though. but definitely take a look at that. My favorite Bible, actually, and this is the most controversial thing I want to say in this in this video, is even though that's a Catholic Bible and lots of actors and it's really well done, it's not my go-to audio Bible. I'm a big fan of David Suchet's narration of the NIV Bible. It's not a dramatic narration or anything like that, but I just love that, and I listen to it a lot. So that is my go-to. Lots of places you can get hold of that. David Suchet is a British character actor, famous for playing Hercule Poirot. If you're into those kinds of TV shows, but amazing job of narrating everything. Of course, it doesn't have the 7 books and all of that, but there's still a lot you can get from that. And then there's also worth pointing out the Bible Experience, which was a project, again, a Protestant project, but a lot of African-American actors. Samuel L. Jackson was actually one of them. Really high quality. I've listened to a few parts of it, but haven't listened to it too much.
The audio Bibles, when you mention, I think the audio Bibles are more for adding to our experience of absorbing scripture. There might be some complement. Some nuances that may just come by listening to a narration, which you may have read it, but it may have not hit home. So just a narration from someone or the audio drama where it suddenly in your mind, it builds a picture which brings you, gives you a better experience of what exactly is going on in that part of scripture. So that's it's an add-on.
That's a good point.
Truly an add-on. Yeah.
Yes, Lectio Divina. If you're into Lectio Divina, that's definitely a thing you can try out.
Right.
When you're praying. And also, like, if you're multitasking, if you're driving, if you're walking, you wouldn't be able to read a Bible at that time. And if you really wanted to, the best thing you can do is actually listen to it. Yeah. And then the other thing to mention is study Bibles, right? So a study Bible is the Bible, but it also has footnotes or additional material that help you in the process of studying the Bible, right? It has, cross references. A lot of the time, Bible passages are connected to other passages in the Bible. And so if you're reading the Bible, if you look down in the footnotes, very often they'll have other passages, parallel passages that you can, flip back and forth, and that'll definitely enhance your Bible study experience. But then there are also specific study Bibles, and there are 3 worth mentioning, good, solid Catholic study Bibles. So the first one is the Derick Bible, and the Derick Bible has footnotes of the connections with the Bible and the Catechism of Catholic Church. A really amazing Bible, very, very useful. The other one is the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible. The New Testament has been out for a while. The Old Testament for that has just come out, I think, a month ago. Dr. Scott Hahn had announced it in his podcast. I think it was a 20-year project that just finally got done. So there's definitely that amazing resource for Bible study. And then there's the Great Adventure Bible as well, worth mentioning, especially if you're doing the Bible in a Year program. You can use any Bible, but the Great Adventure Bible from Ascension Press has some, it's color-coded. It has the tabs based on the time periods and, a lot of additional stuff. So that's definitely good to use along with your Bible study. Have you used any, I think you mentioned some study Bibles or resources that you've used.
Yeah,
right?
No, I do have the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, the New Testament one. That's pretty awesome. So I've used that. Then there are a couple of Protestant ones, but that's not a study Bible. The Amplified version, which has the Greek and the Hebrew fleshed out, it's not that. That's like a word to word, but more elaborate, I guess. I don't know. I'll check out whether it's a formal or dynamic equivalence. That doesn't try to.
It's probably formal.
Formal, yeah. Because it doesn't try to paraphrase, but it kind of expands on the same word a little more. So that's what I like. I think besides study Bibles also, I think podcasts are a good resource, like the Bible in the Year podcast is there, and there's so many more Catholic ones. Even the Great Adventure, I think the early days, the EDIP website has the archives of the Great Adventure series. I think there was one where Scott Hahn and Jeff Cavins did it together. I don't know whether it was called the Great Adventure, but it was like a combination of the timeline and the covenant approach which Scott Hahn takes. Quite a nice one, yeah. So podcasts are another.
Yeah,
That's been my go-to. Yeah.
Speaking of Dr. Scott Hahn, on his website, he does have a lot of free text-based Bible study
Right.
programs, which is pretty good. You can go through, and there are multiple options, multiple studies you can go through. And like you said, the covenant, he talks a lot about the covenants in the Bible, and that's like his framework, the framework that he uses. Another really, those, yeah.
So that's
Cool.
good.
I think that's all I have.
I think that's quite a bit that we have covered, and as we go about deciding on which Bible to use, I think especially for someone who's keen to dive in and learn a little more, yes, the Bible is to identify the right translation is a good starting point, and then all these other resources, the audio or the study Bibles or the apps, they all kind of help you round up, give you that framework and additional resources to go back and forth with and dive deep, and it's really fascinating once we dive in, and there are so many different ways to approach Bible, study the Bible or even do our devotions. I mean, there are too many to kind of cover in one session like this. Probably we'll take another session on some different approaches to take. Like I said, the covenant approach. We could dive into those a little more and help help others understand.
We could break down some of the things we covered today, and each could have its own dedicated
episode itself. Yeah. So
sure.
So that's it for today. Thanks, Gerson, for helping us understand the nuances of how to go about choosing a Bible and the tools around starting a Bible study or a meditation. And look forward to more sessions like that in the coming days.
I'm curious to know what the viewers also use, and if they have any favorite Bibles that they use, and or anything they've learned that they found interesting in this video. So yeah, feel free to comment.
All right, thank you everyone, and look forward to the next time. Bye bye.
Thanks, Derick. Bye.